Okay. Just getting everything up and running. Bear with me for a minute. Making sure I'm live on here. And it looks like it just has my name there at the beginning. Hopefully this is working. With me for a minute. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so good. Well, welcome. I'm a minute early, which is just fine because I like to be ahead of the time if I can. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lindsay Venn. I am a physician assistant, a registered dietitian, and a metabolic health practitioner through the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. Tonight, I'm going to be doing a deep dive on cholesterol. Cholesterol is one of those hot topic words that everyone is so confused about. And the purpose of this presentation tonight is to kind of clarify it, unmuddy the waters when it comes to what you should be worried about, what you shouldn't be worried about, maybe understanding what actually causes things like heart disease and where the controversy of cholesterol came from in relation to heart disease. And so let me just make sure again that this is working. I can see it when I log in, it looks like. So perfect. It looks like a couple other people are in here watching too. Just make sure again. So, and I gotta mute myself. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, here we go. Let me share my screen and we will get on with tonight's presentation so you guys can all learn the truth, or what I put in my slide. You'll see here the good, the bad, and the rest of it when it comes to cholesterol. So here this comes. Perfect. Okay. So today's topic, cholesterol, the good, the bad, and much, 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 much more. You guys are going to get a full amount of education on this tonight. And so first thing I wanted to touch on is, why are people concerned about their cholesterol? Where does this fear come from when they hear, oh, your cholesterol is too high or your LDL is too high? Why is this a concern now when maybe it wasn't a concern 50, 60, 80 years ago? And the big reason is what we call the diet heart hypothesis. And this was a hypothesis that was created, back in the 1970s and 80s, that eventually led to the food guide pyramid. If you want a good education on this, go back and watch my first presentation from December 1st, because it really talks about where did this come from and why do we have this fear. But this is what it is. We were all told at some point that a diet high in saturated fat would lead to high cholesterol, which would lead to heart disease. And I'm going to do my best to debunk that for you here tonight. So first of all, what is heart disease? Well, when we talk about heart disease, it encompasses so many things. So the one that we're really going to focus on tonight is actually coronary artery disease. But that doesn't mean that things like hypertension or high blood pressure or heart failure are not also considered heart disease. But the one that has the implication along with cholesterol is actually coronary artery disease, or CAD. And so why is this a scare? Why are we worried about it? Well, CAD, coronary artery disease, will eventually lead to a heart attack in most people. And so what is this? We call it an MI in the medical world, or a myocardial infarction. And what that means is that there was a blockage in one of the arteries, and I'll put it here, in one of the arteries that feed the actual muscle of the heart. When we get a blockage in that, we have this problem where that part of the heart doesn't get oxygen. And when that happens, it dies. And so where this comes from, myo means muscle, cardia means heart. So that's why it's myocardial infarction. And it literally is lack of blood flow to the muscle, and that muscle will die because it didn't get that adequate oxygenation. So what is cholesterol? What part does this play a role? Well, it is a principal sterol of all higher animals. And this is really important. All animals do create cholesterol. It's very, very important, particularly in places like the brain and the spinal cord. It is essential in cell membranes. And so we need to have cholesterol in our body. If we were to have very low cholesterol, a lot of these things would malfunction and be a problem. And the real bad guy that most people know is LDL, or low density lipoprotein. And so it is one form of cholesterol that we have in the body, but this one is the one that has been villainized by our doctors and ultimately really the pharmaceutical companies. The further they draw that reference range down, or where's the critical cutoff where you need to go on a statin medication, is this number, this LDL number. And again, keep in mind, this is primarily related to the fact that the lower they want to set that bar, the more often they can prescribe medication for this. And so I love this slide. I use this all the time when I'm explaining it to people. The dogma of what we've been taught is that you never want to pour hot grease down a cold pipe, right? And that's what we think of when we think of our arteries. We think, oh, if I'm pouring a lot of grease down my pipes, then it's going to clog my pipes and I'm going to end up with coronary artery disease. But that just isn't the case. So again, this is where it comes back from. Oh, a high fat diet will raise my cholesterol. The high cholesterol will clog my arteries. And then I'm going to end up in this situation with a heart attack. Again, we're going to debunk this. The other part of this that has happened is that a lot of times people, even when they're following a low carb, if they're following a higher fat diet, the dogma out there is that this is going to increase your cholesterol. Well, my big question for you today is this actually true? The body needs cholesterol. Like I said, it functions in our brain, in our spinal cord, in our cell membranes. It works in our immune system. It comes in a lot of different places, and it's absolutely critical for life. Keep in mind that your body makes its own cholesterol. You know, if it's something that the body is producing on its own naturally, then is it something that we really want to try to reduce unnaturally with things like statin medications, or is it something that we need to make sure is healthy versus just low? And so then what is the issue? This is what I want to get into today. I'm sure you've all heard Ben talk about this, but I like to steal some of his analogies. But he talks about the fact that, you know, if you were to look at it from the perspective of, and this is where doctors get it from, if somebody has a heart attack and they go look at their cholesterol, or if they look at the plaques in the artery that was damaged, they're going to find LDL there. Well, the analogy is really quite simple. You know, when a house is burning down, you're going to find lots of firemen and fire trucks. Think of LDL like the fire truck. Did it cause the house to burn down, or is it there in response to a burning home? And that's where we really feel that LDL comes and plays a role. It is part of the immune system, and it functions in a way that it helps heal things when they've been damaged. And so the fact that LDL is present, just like these fire trucks at the fire, it doesn't necessarily mean it was the cause. So let's talk about what I think the cause is. And there is no, and I'll preface this with this statement, there is no 100% proof on what causes coronary artery disease. Not one study has been done that says, yep, this one thing is what causes heart disease, so we have to get it down. So what I think, and a lot of people think causes heart disease, is 4 different things. Number 1, inflammation. We've got a problem with too much inflammation in the vessel. We have this thing called oxidation, which is part of the inflammatory process. We have unhealthy cholesterol, and then we have an immune response to that unhealthy cholesterol. And so just to make this picture seem a little bit more obvious, up here is your bloodstream. This is the lining of your artery wall. You have single cell barriers in your artery wall that are what keep the blood in the bloodstream and keep these other things in what we call the intima. And then we have down here at the bottom, and you can't see it very well, the picture got cut off, but down here we have actually our smooth muscle cells. And these are what make arteries contract. If you think about what your pulse is, how does your pulse function like that? Well, in your arteries, you do have smooth muscle cells that contract in order to move blood through the body, through the arterial system. And so what else is in this picture, though, that might lead to coronary artery disease? Well, we've got our LDL up here, which is our low density lipoprotein cholesterol. We have those cell membrane pieces, like I mentioned before, these little single cell barriers to our wall. And then in here, in this intimal layer, we have a variety of things going on. And so there's 2 ways that LDL can get into the intimal layer. Number 1, if you're insulin resistant, and I will say this forever, every cell in the body can become insulin resistant. And when these cells become insulin resistant, we create what we call leaky gaps. They're supposed to be tight junctions, but these are actually now leaky gaps. And so there's an opportunity, because of the insulin resistance, for the LDL to get into the intimal layer where it's not supposed to be. The other problem is when these LDL become oxidized or damaged from things like high blood sugar, then we have this what I call boulder scenario. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail on boulders versus beach balls in just a minute. But these oxidized LDL are the damaged LDL that are not healthy, and they're what truly causes the problem. From there, we get this immune response. Our macrophages come in, And they will, and I talked about this last week on our lab interpretation video, so if you want to go back and look at that, the macrophages are there to go clean up the garbage, like I've said before. And when they clean up the garbage, which is these oxidized LDL, then they create these things called foam cells and fatty streaks. These smooth muscle cells proliferate, and they join in with those foam cells and fatty streaks, creating this increased area underneath that single cell barrier of the wall, leading to bulging. We eventually will have a clot formation, and this is where the artery will narrow. And so this is the problem here, these four things that I had mentioned at the top of the slide. We do know this. I did want to cite this study. It was done in 1999. To me, that just is astounding. We knew this in 1999, that atherosclerosis is an inflammatory disease. Here's a closer up picture of that. We've known this, and we have yet to focus on that thing called cholesterol rather than focusing on that thing called inflammation. And so I encourage people to start thinking about inflammation more than their cholesterol at this point. This other study in 2018 just said it specifically as well. The concept that inflammation participates pivotally in the pathogenesis of atherosclerosis and its complications has gained considerable attention, but is not yet entered into clinical practice. We know it, we have discovered it, we realize it, but providers like myself are not doing anything about it, unfortunately. And I shouldn't say like myself, I do focus on these pieces. So back to the cholesterol piece, because I really do want to make people feel more comfortable about this. What is cholesterol? Well, cholesterol is a variety of different things, and they come in different phases. So they're all lipoproteins, and they come in different sizes. I know this image is probably small for you guys, but they start out as chylomicrons, and then they become more dense over time, going from a VLDL, which is a very low density lipoprotein, to an intermediate, to a low density, and then to HDL. HDL is actually our healthy form of cholesterol, but that's because it's empty of cholesterol molecules. It actually is coming around to pick up cholesterol and take it back to the liver for metabolism. So the things that are the problem with LDL, again, glycation, meaning too much exposure to blood sugar, and glycation will lead to oxidation, which is those damaged boulders that I was talking about. And then the small dense molecules, when they become damaged, they shrink and they become heavy. And so we really want to make sure when we're looking at LDL, which I'll go into detail about, that we're making sure that we have lots of large fluffy ones versus small dense ones. This other image up here it's a little bit hard to understand, but when we're looking at a functional part of a cholesterol molecule, there's a lot of things going on. So here's a cholesterol in the cell membrane like it's supposed to be. There's some cholesterol in the middle of it as well. This is the functional one. When you add in an oxidized cholesterol molecule here, you're creating problems, or when the cell itself has become glycated, then we're having problems as well. Inflammation plays a role here as well, and we're going to talk about ApoA and ApoB moving on. And then the therapeutic version, this is the one where they have brought in these hydrophobic molecules or drugs in order to keep cholesterol from, like this one, going in and out of the cell. So there's a lot to it. I know that's pretty sciencey, but I wanted to go into it a little bit. So again, remember, it's about the cholesterol with oxidation and an immune response. If cholesterol remains healthy, we don't have this oxidation and we don't have the subsequent immune response to it. So I want to make this simpler. And I've done this many times, and so those of you who have heard this before, we're going to talk about it this way. So I want you to think back when we're looking at this picture here, that this picture is, here's your creek bed and your river that's floating along here. Oops. And then here is your creek bed and your river floating along here. And so if you're be standing on top of this bridge and you had a boulder in one hand and a beach ball in the other, and you were to drop it, which one is going to cause, again, penetration through that creek bed into the intimal layer? Well, your beach balls are not going to do it. It's going to be your boulders. And that's where we really want you to think about LDL and the different forms of LDL when evaluating your blood work and your risk when it comes to coronary artery disease. So what do you do with this piece of information? Well, there's a lot. So bear with me. We're going to go through all of the lab review. So hopefully you have some labs in front of you. If you don't, go grab them because this might be helpful. But we're going to go over what it is. Again, LDL has always been the focus of traditional medicine. And that C is there, LDL-C, because that means it's a calculated number. They actually don't even measure LDL when you go get a regular panel. So remember, this is just calculated. It's not the true measure of where your LDL is. We're going to talk about ApoA versus ApoB, LDLP. So this is particle number, and that is actually the measured LDL that we can get, your triglycerides and your HDL, and the ratio that can be really helpful when determining your risk. So these are all the labs we're going to go over. Basic cholesterol panels, complex cholesterol panels, things like oxidized LDL, because you can measure those boulders, A1C, HOMA-IR, CRP, and then something called a CAC score, and why and when you might want to use these things. So here's an example of a normal cholesterol panel. And so as you can see, they measure your total cholesterol. This is a measurement. There's no C after it. They measure your triglycerides as well, and they measure your HDL. From there, they want to calculate your VLDL and your LDL based on a calculation that they do. What I care mostly about here is not where this LDL calculated number is. What I care about is your triglyceride to HDL ratio. And oddly enough, this is a wonderful example. This person, in my opinion, has great cholesterol, even though they'd be flagged as being high. But what we want to do is take your triglyceride to HDL ratio and figure it out. So if you take your triglycerides, which are 59, you divide by your HDL, which is 72, this person's got a HOMA-IR of around 0.8. This person is a rock star when it comes to their insulin resistance and risk of metabolic health based on this panel. And so make sure to do that calculation with the numbers that you have at home or in front of you. When it comes to the more complex ones, there's two of them out there. There's one called an NMR, and this one is specific for LabCorp. So if you're going to get your blood work done, the type of test you would order would depend on the lab. And so this NMR is very, very helpful when it comes to actually measuring your risk when it comes to LDL, and particularly LDLP. And so, for example, they have this person flagged as high with a score of 1800. The LDLC is still included, so with the HDL, and then they'll scale it for you, which is really nice on this graph. It also incorporates other things like your HDLP that they measured and the size. The size of small LDL is really important. The more small LDL you have, the worse off you are. That's more boulders. We want to get the boulders out. We also want to know the peak size of your LDL, because the bigger the peak size, the more of those beach balls you have when compared to boulders. The other thing I really like about the NMR that is not included in the cardiac IQ is this LPIR score. So this is your score of insulin resistance based on how things look when it comes to your cholesterol measures. This one is the cardiac IQ. This one is specific to Quest. So if you're using a Quest laboratory, this is the kind of report that you would actually get. It still too measures your typical lipid panel that you would get from your regular doctor, but it also has the particle number, the size, the number of the size. This one actually has your pattern, and we're going to talk about pattern A versus pattern B. And then again, that peak size that we want to be bigger, not smaller. This one also includes ApoB that we're going to talk about in detail, and then lipoprotein little a as well. These are both considered to be significant risk factors when it comes to heart disease. But as we're going to talk about, there's some other factors that are actually probably more important. So you can't look at these things in isolation. The next one is oxidized LDL, and I honestly don't measure this very much in people. I do have some patients that come to me with this value, but it literally is looking at the amount of oxidation that has been done to your LDL. So it's a great one to get if you're worried that you have too much inflammation, glycation, oxidation going on. It's probably one of the better ways to measure outside of like an A1C what we're doing with glycation and oxidation. So pattern A and pattern B. Now all these A's and B's get extremely confusing, and I just tell people to remember B is bad. So that's the easier way to remember, ooh, did I want to be a pattern A or a pattern B? B tends to be the bad one. So in this one up here, this is pattern A, and this is looking at the different kinds of LDL particle that you have. And pattern A gives you one peak here. That's really good. You only want to have one type of LDL that has this oxidation done to it, versus down here where you can see that they've got 2 or 3 different kinds of that LDL that have been oxidized. So pattern B indicates that more variety of LDL has problems versus just one type. When it comes to ApoA versus ApoB, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more too, this study goes in and shows that actually the more ApoA you have, the better off you are. And it's not like you can have high levels of both. And so this looks at ischemic heart disease, if you guys can read that over here. So more ischemic heart disease occurred with less ApoA, and less heart disease occurred with more ApoA. So we do want to have that ApoA phenotype compared to ApoB. So what is ApoB and why do we have so much buzz about it out there? So ApoB is it's an apolipoprotein B is what it stands for. And it is a protein that is found on your lower density, not your HDL, but your lower density lipoproteins. And so anyone with a high LDL, even if it's a healthier high LDL, is going to have a higher ApoB. And that's why it's important to get that particle number and the NMR and that kind of thing. Because if you just have high LDL, but they look healthy and they're not oxidized, then ApoB is far less of a concern. I did paraphrase Ben here as well from some of his stuff. ApoB is a relevant cardiovascular marker, but its risk implications must be interpreted in light of insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and overall metabolic health. And that's why I put it in there, because it's very well said. If someone is massively healthy, their insulin resistance is great, their inflammation is great, all other markers are good, but yet they have a high ApoB, we look at the entire picture. We don't just look at that one number. There's lots of influencers out there who are really trying to push that if you have high ApoB, you should be on a statin. And we don't agree with that. We think that if you can improve all of the other risk factors and ApoB is alone in isolation, there's a lot less to fear in that case. So let's go on to A1C and HOMA-IR. I talk a lot about these, so I'm not going to drive this point too hard, but A1C gives you a 3-month average blood sugar. And the thing that is good about it is it tells you how much glycation has been done, which can be a bit of an indicator to how much glycation is being done to everything else in the body. Sugar just doesn't glycate red blood cells. It glycates, like I said, the inside of your arteries or your LDL, or, that's why people with high A1Cs or diabetes end up being blind or having kidney failure, because those tissues have also now been glycated and oxidized, leading to problems. And so this A1C is a good indicator that can in turn determine how much damage you're getting done by the blood sugar. And then the HOMA-IR is another really good one that I like. I do tell people to keep in mind it's a snapshot. Insulin has a half-life of about 30 seconds. And so if you happen to catch a low insulin randomly, this could be a false good or a false bad, depending on what you've got going on. But this is something that you can calculate very simply with an insulin and a glucose, plug it into a calculator and go from there. CRP, especially HSCRP, this one stands for high sensitivity CRP. And the difference here is that this measures a very smaller range. And so you can pick up inflammation a lot quicker and in smaller amounts if you get an HSCRP versus just a regular CRP. The biggest thing here is that they found it to be of the greatest predictive value in patients with intermediate coronary artery disease. It's not quite as predictive in patients who don't have already known coronary artery disease. So it's a good marker, one I recommend in everyone, but not, again, a standalone test to determine your risk. This one, the CAC score, so this stands for coronary artery calcium score. I took this image out of, it's called UpToDate. This is a very highly renowned medical database for those of us to use that we need. And so even when you look up coronary artery calcium score, and this is of course with a score of 0, they didn't look at if you had a score of 10 or 20 or whatever, but they compared it to all of these other predictive factors. So things like homocysteine levels is listed up here. If you have an HSCRP of less than 2, no metabolic syndrome, all of those kinds of things, no carotid plaque. Well, they found that a score of 0 on your CAC is significantly, and that is actually a big difference, significantly more predictive of lack of heart disease risk compared to all of those other things even combined. And so if you're worried, if your doctor's stressing out about it, I do highly recommend to get a coronary artery calcium score. They're cheap. You can get them cash pay for under $100. It's a 1-slice CAT scan of the heart, so it's very little radiation exposure, and it'll give you a really good idea as far as where your coronary risk is compared to just what your cholesterol levels are. And so for any of my patients who are trying to push back on their doctor about their statin, this is a really easy place to go. And if you do it cash pay, you have the information, and whether you choose to share it with your doctor or not is up to you, versus if they order it, then they have the information, and if it comes back high, they've got more fuel for the statin. If it comes back low, you've got more fuel. So something definitely to consider. So back to the main question. So which of these things causes heart disease? Is it the oxidation? Is it the inflammation? Is it the immune response? Is it the cholesterol? What is the answer to this big question? And the answer is none of the above. None of those things are actually the primary cause. we really want to get to the root cause of this. So what is the root cause of inflammation and oxidation and unhealthy cholesterol? And that's our standard American diet. The standard American diet, for sure, 100% is the increased risk of heart disease that we have seen over the last 50 years. This diet will create higher blood sugars. It will therefore lead to higher levels of glycation, which therefore leads to more oxidation, which leads to those boulders that I was talking about, and then the subsequent immune response. So if you can fix the diet, you can prevent all of these things from happening and therefore prevent your risk of coronary artery disease moving forward. So what can you do? Number one, avoid refined processed carbohydrates. That's an easy one. If you want to eat carbohydrates, do whole foods. Avoid refined seed oils. These are extremely inflammatory. And where we know we're fighting inflammation, you need to get seed oils out of the diet. There's wonderful systems out there, such as the Feel Great system, which do a great job when it comes to helping you avoid the refined processed carbohydrates, do a little bit of intermittent fasting, keep that glycemic response down by incorporating the balance in the system, improve insulin sensitivity with the Unimate. So it's a wonderful system to help with this. Some other things that you can do. You can reduce your stress, do everything you can in that regard. I know that's hard and sometimes unavoidable, but do what you can there. Make sure you're getting adequate and quality sleep. Get in some exercise. I call it intentional exercise every single day, whether it be walking or weightlifting, yoga, whatever you want. And then make sure to work with your doctor as you incorporate these things, particularly if you are on medications where these changes might make some changes to your meds. So what else can you do? There are some things that you can do. Vitamin K2, this is a huge one. People oftentimes, especially if they're talking about their heart, confuse this with vitamin K1. K1 is the one that is involved in blood clotting. K2 has nothing to do with blood clotting. It is involved in getting calcium out of your bloodstream and into your bones. And so it's wonderful for preventing things like osteoporosis, but also if you have some calcified plaque in your arteries already that you would find on like a CAC score, it will help remove that calcification and take it to the bone rather instead. And so the recommended dose for this is 400 to 600 micrograms per day. There's lots of studies out there that go actually quite a bit higher than this. The downside is that vitamin D3 that comes in combination with K2, oftentimes those K2 doses are way lower than this. You're at 100 micrograms rather than this 500-ish. Adding in a high quality omega-3 can be very, very helpful. We have such a terrible omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in the diet that we eat. And sometimes the only way to overcome that is by supplementing with a good high quality omega-3. If you get a cheap one, you're not doing yourself any favors and you're probably actually doing more harm than good. So this is one place where I say, spend the money to get a good one. Otherwise, don't do it at all and focus more on your fatty fish. Do your research on statins. Statin medications, in my opinion, are the devil. I don't like to have my patients on statins. There are some people who need statins and that benefit from them. But the vast majority of people who are on statins for primary prevention, meaning that you are trying to prevent a heart attack from ever happening, the benefit is like 0.01%. It's very, very, very low. The benefit for those for secondary prevention, which is someone who's already had a heart attack, they get a little bit more benefit. It's about a 3% benefit out of a statin. And so really do your research on statins. The side effects are significant, and that includes things like Alzheimer's disease and diabetes. And so if you have diabetes and you're on a statin, you might want to consider, what's worse, the higher blood sugar from the statin or getting that cholesterol down, because that's the arbitrary thing that the doctor wants to do. So I really encourage people to do your research on this. People like Aseem Malhotra are a great resource. There's a variety of them out there. Paul Mason is another one, David Diamond, that really dive deep into this. If you are on a statin, you must take CoQ10. Statins will deplete your CoQ10, which is essential in heart health. And so if you are on a statin, you need to take a CoQ10. And then red yeast rice. I have so many people who come to me who have substituted their statin for red yeast rice. Or I said that backwards. They're taking red yeast rice so they don't have to take a statin. And that's usually what the doctor will recommend. They'll say, okay, if you don't want to take a statin, take your red yeast rice. It functions just like a statin. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're still going to have the risks that come with it, including the higher blood sugars and the mental health risks. I encourage people to rethink your calcium supplement, particularly my menopausal aged women. So many of us have been told we have to take calcium to prevent or improve our osteoporosis. Too much calcium in the blood makes that calcified plaque easier. And so we want to make sure that if you think you need to be on a calcium supplement, consult with your doctor, because maybe you don't. The benefit for things like hip fracture are not there. They've not found it. And they have found that women who supplement with calcium, especially menopausal age women, have more incidence of heart disease. And so we really want to be thinking on that. If you're on a medication to lower or to improve your osteoporosis, things like Prolia or Fosamax, then you do need to take a calcium supplement. But this is the reason why you need to consult with your doctor. And then, of course, always, the Feel Great system is a simple, natural, easy way to help with all of these things. So what can you expect? If you do the things that I just told you to do, what could you expect? Well, the coolest thing is that triglyceride to HDL ratio really turns around fast. And so you can see great improvement in 3 to 4 weeks just doing something like what I'm talking about with the diet and the exercise, the stress management. You'll also see rapid improvement in things like your HOMA-IR and A1C. You know, if you give that 3 months like the A1C requires, you're going to see really fast improvement in those numbers by changing the diet, incorporating some of those supplements, etc. You should experience some weight loss, particularly visceral fat, which is the dangerous kind. You should see a gradual, this one's slower, but a gradual improvement in those more specified cholesterol panels. So don't be upset if you recheck it in 3 months and it's barely moved. That's normal. We expect that one to only improve slowly. Same with the CRP. That one takes a little bit longer for it to come down, though I definitely see them come down with just these lifestyle interventions. And then when it comes to your CAC, there's a lot of debate on that. Can you make your CAC score better? You know, if you come in with 100, can you drop it to 50? I have seen that happen. It's not very common, but the one thing I know you can do is prevent that CAC from getting worse. And so doing the things I mentioned again with the diet and the supplements can be very helpful in at least preventing the progression of coronary artery disease. Some other things you can do, you can consult with me. I've got a couple of options. I've got initial visits and then also what I call a meet and greet, which is very inexpensive. If you have questions on whether I can help you or not, get on my website, find the links that are all there and book a meet and greet. It doesn't hurt to do a 15-minute consultation where I might be able to guide you in the right direction. And then also Insulin IQ. As you know, I also work with Insulin IQ. They have wonderful resources when it comes to what you can do on your own, plus with a little added support. So the community membership is great. You get access to myself and Carly and Rich, plus the 90-day course on how to reverse insulin resistance. And we deep dive a lot in that course on cholesterol and all of the things that I've talked about today. They do have certified coaches that are also there to help with the diet and lifestyle things. And then, of course, you can sign up for a medical consultation there too if you'd rather go through them. Some resources, and I'll try to do my best to get these into the chat when we're done here. So if you are interested in any of those supplements that I talked about, the Feel Great system, I'll share the link. The ADK that I recommend that has the higher levels of vitamin K2 in it are in this Fullscripts link, as well as a really high quality omega-3 option. And so I'll share that in the chat. If you want to do some lab ordering, if you want some more specified lab ordering, email me. I'm more than happy to help set up some cash pay options when it comes to lab ordering for more specialized tests. You can consult with me again, either through Venn Integrative or through Insulin IQ. So thanks again for participating. Let me get out my phone and see if we have any questions that has come up. Oops, and I should stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Oh, and Carly, thank you. She put into the chat there that Insulin IQ does have their own HOMA-IR calculator now. And so if you just go to insuliniq.com, up in the services tab, there is a HOMA-IR calculator that you can get into. Let's see here. Any questions? Does anybody else have questions or thoughts or concerns? I'm not seeing any as of yet. Again, for anybody who is wondering, or if you have friends who weren't able to join tonight, these do get saved. They get recorded and saved on YouTube. So if you just go to Venn Integrative Medicine on YouTube, you'll be able to find all of these recordings, this one as well as any previous ones that I've done. Oh, hi, John. Thank you for the kind words. So yay. Well, I'm glad that this hopefully was helpful. It's a lot of science. I know it's there, but hopefully it really cleared up the fact that cholesterol isn't the demon, particularly LDL is not the demon here. We want to make sure that you understand that. Really working on your metabolic health, including your blood sugars, your inflammation, is the primary thing that you can do to prevent coronary artery disease. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I hope everybody has a great Monday night. I'll go ahead and end this, and we'll do this again. I'm going to aim for later this week, but it might be next week. We've got company coming. So